Cy Hirsch just released the fact that the United States blew up the Nord Stream 2 pipeline. You weren't briefed on that. Why not? Are you going to put a congressional probe into that? Yes or no? Because this ain't no ordinary journalist. You know that.
So,
I want to hear what he has to say.
Nord Stream is a pipeline that transfers oil from Europe, particularly Germany. I'm sorry, from Russia to Germany. So we don't have the authority to investigate pipelines.
All right, come on. Now that's bullshit. You know that. Victoria Nuland herself says she's happy that it's a pile of metal underwater. Do you share her sentiment?
Here's what we know. The Europeans are conducting an investigation.
They investigated her.
And it is true.
Why did Joe Biden say that we are going to get rid of the Nord Stream pipeline? And when asked, but wait a minute, that's run by Gazprom in Germany, how are you going to do it? He said,
we'll be able to do it.
If you have definitive evidence.
Yeah, we do. It's called Cy Hirsch. Congressman, you eat here? Really?
I live in the neighborhood.
Oh, wow, that's awesome. You know, it's hard because people don't often see you in the neighborhood. That's crazy. You know, let me tell you something. You know, what is it about you and endless war? You just seem to love war, whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Gaza. You know, the thousands of dead Palestinian children that you funded. You know, don't you think that that's crazy? You know,
why you're uncovered for war?
Do you agree or disagree with the DNI that the war in Ukraine is pretty much over and that the Trump administration is trying to... I'm a tool of the Kremlin? Seriously? You know what is reality? That you are responsible for the death of thousands of Palestinian children, thousands of Ukrainian children. You love funding war. Congressman, no matter where you go in the Bronx, people hate you because they know the truth about you, Congressman. They know what you really are, a sellout, an AIPAC sellout, okay? All you do is get paid by the Israeli lobby. You are nothing. You're a joke of a congressman. You have no real principles whatsoever.
Some of the richest Zionists live in the Bronx.
The Bronx is one of the poorest districts in America, but also has some of the richest Zionist millionaires in America, too. How is that?
Because rich people like to live in areas where they can buy the politicians easily, like Richie Torres, who is bought and controlled by Zionist influencers and millionaires who all live in Riverdale, while also this district, being one of the poorest congressional districts, has the lowest voter turnout rate. So the less people that vote, the easier it is to buy a politician. I will be debating Richie Torres, and I'm going to confront Richie Torres on every dollar that he has profited from the death of Palestinian children and every dollar that he's profited from the slumlords who have enslaved the Bronx, who all fund his congressional campaigns. Do you want to see that fight? You have to pay the price of admission. And that price of admission is getting me on the ballot. If you want to see that happen, if you want to be part of the 100 plus people who are going to come out and petition for me to get me on the ballot and give the Bronx a real fighting voice, you can sign up at votevega.nyc and press the volunteer button.
Yeah, baby. Hey. It's episode 69 of The Whiners on February 5th, 2026. Jeff Norman and Morgan with you as we always are on Thursday nights. And our other co-host, Ryan Milton, is out now. He has
That's me.
Our other co-host, Ryan Milton, is out tonight. He had a haircut appointment that could not be moved, and we understand his hairdresser is very much in demand, so that's understandable. And our special guest is Jose Vega. You've already heard from him. He stepped on my brilliant introduction, but that's okay. It's a freewheeling show. Jose is a friend of the show and a friend of us personally. He is running for United States Congress, as you might have heard, and we are very happy to welcome him back. How are you, Jose?
I'm doing good. I'm doing well. You know, it's been a very tumultuous last few days, but I'm proud to announce actually that I had put out a goal, you know, given all the things we're going to talk about in the show. You know, maybe I'll announce it after actually we talk about it, just to give people some context. You know.
Okay. Well, it is a big night. Another milestone is tonight is the very first night nobody is drinking wine on the show. And it's not only because Ryan isn't here, it is because I have a nasty cold and I've been getting through this week with naps and tea. So teetotaler, the word for somebody who doesn't drink alcohol, has a double meaning tonight. So, and Jose, you're not drinking either. So anyway, we'll have the spirit of the show, freewheeling. We don't need alcohol to be freewheeling.
No,
how are you doing, Morgan? Look at Morgan. She's so ebullient.
Oh.
Unlike Caitlin Collins, who never smiles, according to Trump, Morgan often treats us to an ear-to-ear grin.
Well, Jose, I'm so happy to have you back. And you've kind of made some waves recently with a particular kind of video.
Yeah, you were there when we filmed it. Actually, I don't think
I was filming it.
That's right. Yeah, I don't think either of us expected it to go the way that did. Let me make one thing clear, by the way, too. Eric Warsaw reached out to us to interview that, you know, as you'll read in the Jerusalem Post article that you may show, it says that this was an official campaign video. It was not. That's right. You know, this was not an official campaign video. This was Eric Warsaw who wanted to interview me. He added the graphics. I would not have chosen those graphics, but that's what he wanted to go with. That's on him. So,
all right.
You know.
Well, I'm not sure everybody even understands what you're talking about. So maybe we should set that up. What you're referring to is your opponent for Congress is the incumbent Richie Torres, and you are being accused of being anti-Semitic. And first of all, I think we should congratulate you that you're getting all this attention, because that's what it's all about. I mean, if you're ignored, they ignore you when you're not much of a threat. This means you are a threat. So I mean that sincerely. Congratulations. It's not just the Jerusalem Post, it's the Jewish Star. And since we know Jews control the media, you're probably in every other paper too. No, I'm just kidding.
I'll say I don't agree with that statement. That was clearly a joke.
Hold on, the Akron Jewish News, the Springfield Jewish News, the Cape Cod Jewish News.
B'nai B'rith Budapest also, you know, posted it.
Budapest.
Budapest.
The Budapest in Hungary?
My goodness.
Yeah.
Wow, you are a worldwide anti-Semite.
They ran the exact same story, the exact word for word, you know, in just
that's how it works.
Yeah.
So this guy Eric Warsaw, is that his last name?
Warsaw, yeah.
Warsaw. He, I guess, is accused of the great sin of being a buddy of what's his name, the big
Nick Fuentes.
Nick Fuentes. So let me ask you straight out: do you disavow Nick Fuentes?
First of all, I don't play the guilt by association game. Me personally, I think Nick Fuentes is a Fed. All that Epstein peddling stuff, I think calling him cool is crazy. But that being said, I understand that there are a lot of people who seem to listen to him or even like him. I don't care personally. If people are going to quote me, they should quote me, not the people I'm with, for example. You know, I'm sure, Jeff, you say things that I completely disagree with, you know, but they're not going to, you know, people can't quote me because of something you said, you know. So, you know, there's going to be a lot of people who are going to support me. And that's just the case of when you go big. They're going to have views and have said things that I might find reprehensible, but that doesn't mean they speak for me. So,
all right. So you refuse to disavow Nick Fuentes. Do you disavow Eric Warsaw?
Oh my God. Of course not. I don't disavow anybody. Okay. You know, it's about the content of what was said in the video that matters more than who I was standing next to or anything like that. And of course, the people who wrote these hit pieces on me know that.
Right. Well, I'm kidding, of course. You know what this reminds me of is when Trump was running for president the first time, they constantly asked him if he disavows David Duke. David Duke was like the former Ku Klux Klan guy, and Trump just kept disavowing him over and over again, but they kept running these articles anyway, saying that he hasn't disavowed him. And every time he was interviewed, they'd ask him again as if he hadn't already done. Let me just play that, because I think actually this is something you might want to study to sort of adapt as your strategy to deal with this nonsense. Deal with this nonsense. It's also kind of funny. Let's take a look.
You've got David Duke just joined, a bigot, a racist, a problem. I mean, this is not exactly the people you want in your party.
Yeah, David Duke and all were disavowed. I disavowed him on Friday. I disavowed him right after that because I thought if there was any question.
I didn't even know he endorsed me. David Duke endorsed me? Okay. All right. I disavow, okay?
I disavowed David Duke, and I disavowed him the day before at a major news conference. David Duke is a bad person who I disavowed on numerous occasions over the years. I'm saying to myself, how many times do I have to continue to disavow people?
So are you prepared right now to make a clear and unequivocal statement renouncing the support of all white supremacists?
Of course I am. Of course I am. I mean, there's nobody that's done so much for equality as I have.
Racism is evil, and those who cause violence in its name are criminals and thugs, including the KKK, neo-Nazis, white supremacists.
I disavowed David Duke all weekend long on Facebook, on Twitter, and obviously it's never enough. I disavowed him every time I speak to somebody virtually, and you know, they just keep it going. They keep it going. And
I totally disavow the Ku Klux Klan. I totally disavow David Duke. I've been doing it now for 2 weeks. You're probably about the 18th person that's asked me the question.
All right, this video goes on and on like that, so you get the idea. So it's analogous to your situation is that you're going to be getting accused of being anti-Semitic over and over again. So looking at how Trump handled it, do you see any lesson that can be gleaned from that, or do you already have in mind a strategy?
Well, the thing is, they're trying to hide the fact of what I said. That's the truth, right? So they want to just sort of put this facade up that it's anti-Semitic. But, you know, everyone knows AIPAC, right? AIPAC is in the news. And, you know, the people at Track AIPAC, despite the fact that they don't want to endorse me, have done a very good job at putting out, you know, awareness of the fact that most of their politicians are bought by Track AIPAC, by AIPAC. Now, the second biggest Israeli lobby is called NORPAC, NORPAC. They send 1,000 people to Washington, D.C. every single year to lobby on behalf of Israel. You know where their offices are? Englewood, New Jersey, Teaneck, and Riverdale, the Bronx, my district. Okay. This is where people who are the vice presidents of the Riverdale chapter, that's where they are in my district. Not only that, but you have this guy who works for Prager University who sued Harvard for anti-Semitism and not protecting Jewish students enough. His name is Shabbos Kestenbaum. You know, he sued Harvard, and I believe they had settled for an undisclosed amount, saying that Harvard wasn't doing enough to protect its Jewish students, and that they weren't enforcing, you know, their sort of protocol and allowing speech, you know, evenly or fairly, because they allowed somebody who was, you know, anti-Semitic to come on the campus, even though before that Harvard has rejected speakers from coming in because of their viewpoints. That was sort of the foundation of the lawsuit that he claimed was the case. Now, that guy's also here in Riverdale. In fact, he was on Piers Morgan debating my other opponent, Michael Blake, who I call Michael Fake, and, you know, he said that he's a proud constituent of Richie Torres. So, you know, that's there as well. And there's like, oh, and one more person, right? There's a guy who is the owner of a housing company called Chestnut Holdings. Chestnut Holdings owns a majority of the buildings in New York City, if not one of the biggest owners of property in New York City. He is the worst landlord in all of New York City, the most tenant actions. Where does he have his offices? In Riverdale. Not only that, his name is Jonathan Weiner. I'm naming the names, right? Because, you know, I'm just going to do that because these are the people that own Richie Torres. He's also a big donor to Richie Torres, and he himself refers to himself as an Orthodox Zionist who owns property in the peripheries of Israel. What exactly does that mean? I really can't tell you. I can guess that it probably means, you know, somewhere in the West Bank where they, you know, are forcibly removing Palestinians from, you know, the West Bank. So that's probably what's happening. So he's displacing people over there, displacing people over here. That's what this is about. It's about economics. It's about the fact that I hurt the feelings of the billionaire Epstein class that lives both in Riverdale and in the United States as a whole. And they don't want me addressing the fact that they get to live like kings while the rest of the peasants have to live like animals. I believe in the dignity of every human being. Richie Torres does not. Richie Torres believes that you have to have money to earn his attention. And as far as he's concerned, the poor people of the Bronx got nothing to say. So, you know, they can hide behind anti-Semitism, but it falls apart very quickly, especially after all this Epstein stuff. We are talking about the Epstein class of people who bought our politicians. That's what this is about. Doesn't matter what religion there are, okay? Talking about people like Peter Thiel, Barry Weiss, Paul Singer, you know, Sam Bankman-Fried, Mark Andreessen. These are people that have all supported Richie Torres in one way or another. You know, that's what this is about.
Right. So is this your strategy? What we're hearing right now is just to come back and tell the truth as to what your position really is, and just hope that the anti-Semitism label isn't effective?
Well, the anti-Semitism label doesn't work anymore, especially because it's not true. I'm not an anti-Semite, but, you know, I can say that till it, like, look, they're calling Miss Rachel anti-Semitic now. You know, what did she do? She had the audacity to humanize a young girl from Gaza who had her legs blown off. And that is the crime that she committed, to say that this girl has the right to dance to my music as any other young girl. That's what she did. That's the crime that she's guilty of. And she apologized too, by the way, for accidentally liking an anti-Semitic comment. You know what? Wasn't even enough. They wanted her to turn her whole platform into why she's now, you know, promoting anti-Semitism awareness. And that still probably wouldn't be enough. It is never enough, you know, to act in a dishonest way.
Yeah, you certainly shouldn't apologize. And you should. And I don't know anything about this guy, Warsaw. But I always thought the notion of having to subject somebody who's interviewing you to a purity test is absolutely ridiculous, because I'm not saying there's anything wrong with this guy or his audience, but let's just assume the guy is some kind of terrible human being. His audience is all terrible. If you're trying to win an election, you win by getting the votes, or the majority of votes, of everybody, not just nice people. Why wouldn't you want to reach the scumbag, so to speak, right?
Oh, you're asking me why would I want to come back?
No, why wouldn't you? No, why wouldn't you want to reach everybody? Why would you want to, like, make sure you're only reaching nice people and only doing nice shows?
Oh,
I mean, yeah, that's what I'm saying.
What were you gonna say, Morgan?
Oh, I was just saying, I don't want to, you know, badmouth Eric Warsaw. I genuinely don't think he's a bad person. You know, he has an audience.
I said hypothetically. I don't know anything about him either. I'm saying even if he were, or there was some other host who was a terrible person, why not do the show anyway if you can reach an audience that maybe you otherwise can't reach?
Oh, well, like, for example, I think Glenn Greenwald is a great, he had a great thing on that. He said people were condemning him, Glenn Greenwald, for interviewing with Nick Fuentes, right, and for platforming his views. But he said there are people out here who shake hands with people like Obama and Clinton and Mike Pompeo and some of the worst war criminals like Kamala Harris and Joe Biden. And he's supposed to get flack because he's talking to someone who says, you know, things that I completely abhor and object to. No, I think a good example recently was Candace Owens and Bassem Youssef. That was a great dialogue, you know, and probably my camera. I saw that. Yeah, it was a great dialogue. And what I really liked about it was the fact that they both were coming from where they come from. Bassem is a lefty. Candace is not, and they just said, you know what, we're going to sit down and talk anyway. And I think you're right. There is definitely benefit into talking to the other side. I think as long as it's in good faith, though. You don't want to do, I'm not trying to do like shock jockey, stuff. It's like if I'm, if I want to have a conversation, I'm going to have a conversation.
Yeah. What I found gross that was like riddled through all these articles was, yeah, he said that the Bronx is the poorest congressional district, but he also said that it's run by Zionists. But the larger story here is it's the poorest congressional district in the entire country. And you have rich people who, whatever religion they subscribe to, live in a place called Riverdale that is gerrymandered into the district. And I think that is something that needs to be driven home. Is you're saying, are you conceding to the point that this is a poor district and that their voices aren't, needed to be heard? Yeah. And there was one article at the very end. It had you basically a quote from you denouncing war. And that was like their final punch as look at how awful this man is. He's such an anti-Semite. He's against war.
Yeah, that's the thing that's the thing they're going to hide behind because they're scared. And I think partly because we stumbled upon something even they didn't expect for us to. We were not, when we had that town hall with Tony Aguilar and Josephine Guilbeault called The Bronx is Gaza West, we were more right than we thought we were about that, and that is ultimately what freaked them out. If you read all of these articles, they all say that's when we launched our campaign, that was the campaign launch point. As you know, we had launched our campaign months before that had happened, but they keep coming back to that thing because that's how much it pissed them off, that this is where he's launching his campaign from. So regardless, I don't care.
I'm sorry, I missed that. I know the event you're talking about. It was in the Bronx a few months ago, and it was the issue was over the particular venue or neighborhood, or what were you just saying?
I guess the name, the subject, conflating what happened to Gaza to kind of the dilapidation that you find in the Bronx, where you have buildings that collapse on themselves. But maybe you can go into the venue that we had as well, or that you had the town hall at.
Oh yeah, well the venue we had the town hall at it was a boxing gym, which is now closed down, by the way. Thankfully, they found a new space. I have no information as to where it is, but I just know that there is a new space now. But basically, weeks after we had that event there, the landlord just mysteriously decided, not weeks, a week after we had that event there, the landlord just decided to sell out of nowhere this boxing gym that had been there, a staple for the community for over 15 years. And it was like, why is this happening out of nowhere? What just happened? So it, yeah, but that
it's because of the event you did. He was getting threats or something.
Well, that event was one in a microcosm of stuff because that boxing gym was founded as a place to give young people redemption. Basically, hey, don't go out in the streets and beat people up. Come and learn how to box. Take your energy out here. Get a discipline instead. But also, they were very politically active too. I mean, they were definitely leftist. Of course, they're not going to deny that for you. They would go to marches. They would go to protests. They would go to rallies. They were out there, just supporting people basically and supporting the causes that needed to be supported. They were very much an active force in the community. And so I think the landlord had received an offer he couldn't refuse, basically, once we had that event. That was basically the straw that broke the camel's back, is my theory. Because they're like, okay, this place has got to go. So they just basically destroyed, a whole bunch of history that had existed at this boxing gym that had birthed, something beautiful in the Bronx. So anyway.
Well, I have another venue for you. You probably know it already, but I thought of this when I saw the video the other day. Are you familiar with the GNR Deli in the Bronx?
There's a lot of delis with names.
All right. Watch this video. Watch this video. You've got to have your finger on the pulse. I'm going to help you again, Jose. Here we go.
Okay.
Get your head, this motherfucker. Get the hell! So the other day, I went to the Bronx to this spot called G&R Deli, which has not only been around for over 40 years, but they really do make some of the best sandwiches I've had in my life over here. They went viral last year for this thing they call the Italian ice cream cone, which is their homemade meatballs and marinara sauce served inside of a hollowed out hero roll, which you can now get with their homemade vodka sauce, which is made with prosciutto, shallots, vodka, and sambuca. Then they stuff the roll with layers of meatballs and sauce until it's filled to the top and then cover it with Parmesan cheese. And this thing is incredible. The meatballs here are possibly the best I've had in my life.
You know, there's a Vietnamese place right around the corner from there that I go to occasionally. I never realized the GNR is right there. And like, damn, that looks very good.
Doesn't it? Doesn't it? Yeah. When you go out and shake hands and all that, maybe that's a place to hit.
Maybe.
Yeah, you ignore. I gave you good advice earlier today that you already ignored. I advised you to show up on tonight's show wearing a yarmulke and drinking Manischewitz wine. Very good advice.
We're not going to get out of it, Jose. We're just picking on you.
You totally disregarded it. But maybe you'll follow my advice now and go to this deli. Stick with me, kid, and you'll be in Congress even before Election Day.
You know, it's funny because like I love, you know, you guys, I don't know if you watch Due Dissidence or not, but like those guys are hilarious. They always try to get me into some deep trouble, you know, like whether it's Russ on the Jimmy Dore show, he'll like open up by making some lewd joke, or Keaton.
Yeah, I saw him calling you a Jew hater. Noted famous Jew hater, Jose Vega.
Or like Keaton when I was on his show the other day after Glenn Greenwald, by the way. He like opens up by saying, "All right, anti-Semite Jose Vega joins the show now." It's like,
right. I didn't even do that. I'm giving you advice on how to show you're not.
We wanted to be funny with you, and you shot us down.
I'm trying.
Manischewitz wine would fit in perfectly with the Whiners.
It's you know, it's interesting, right? Because I mean, Morgan knows, you know, she's been around the campaign since we were running as independents back in 2024. It's 2026 now. Oh my God.
I know.
Jesus Christ. But you know, like there were times where we would joke like, "Oh, Jose Vega's doing this. Watch out. Don't let the media find out. Don't let the media find out." So I'm like, yeah, fuck that. Your mind does change a little bit about how you present yourself in these things. Like now I find myself preparing for shows. Now I find myself like having to make sure I know what I got to get across no matter what, you know, because like, yeah, if you're a politician, I guess you're supposed to do your due diligence and do that anyway. I used to just shoot from the hip. Now it's like, okay, well, you know, they can twist my words around. They can, like the thing from the Jerusalem Post article that was so funny was they had brought up the billboard. I made this billboard that said, if you go down.
Yeah, it's a video that went viral.
Stupidly viral. But in that article, they show the billboard, and the billboard was a billboard that says, you know, for every dollar, for every Palestinian child that dies, your Congressman Richie Torres made a profit. Let the Palestinian children live. And so I had
can't have any of that.
Somebody sent me that video to post on my social media account. And that went stupidly viral to the point that Richie Torres issued a statement saying that my opponents are circulating a video that is full of libel and slanders and blah, blah, blah. You know,
you're going to forget the most important part? He said that it was language to incite violence.
Yeah, but see, it's interesting because, yes, that's right. He did say that. And that's what he said about Guy Christensen, too. And he just lost a federal court case. For people who don't know, Guy Christensen is a now 20-year-old TikToker who initiated charges against him, saying that Guy Christensen was threatening Richie Torres' life for criticizing him and for criticizing how much money he was getting from AIPAC. Thankfully, Guy Christensen just won in court, basically saying that's BS. But regardless, so they quoted me when I was on the Jimmy Dore show weeks ago, in the beginning of January, before this whole fiasco with Eric Warsaw happened. And it was funny, the way they quote me, it's like, on the Jimmy Dore show, Jose Vega would not confirm nor deny if he made and produced that billboard. But he said with a smile, I will not confirm or deny I made this, but I can tell you for sure it's not AI because I hate AI. You know, just to like watch them sort of squirm about how they had
a whole team on it. That's the kind of the crazy part.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, that's
Well,
right.
it's good to
And
be careful, but I mean, if you walk around on eggshells too much, you won't even have any fun. And there's no escaping things sometimes too. Like you might retweet something that somebody else posted, and then it'll turn out that in the background of the photo is somebody who once met Nick Fuentes or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, no, you're absolutely right, and it's like I'm
Mhm.
trying to sort of like get my. Well, that's the other thing, because of the attacks that have come out against me. I put out a call a couple days ago, like we're gonna need boots on the ground. We got a petition, and we need to raise $100,000. Well, I'm proud to say I put that video up, like yesterday or something, right? It was yesterday. Right? Since then, we have raised over $12,000 so far. So we're 12% of the way to our goal. Not only that, but we had a lot of people sign up who say they want to come out and petition for us. This is great. And if you're somebody who's in the New York area and you want to register to vote as a Democrat to sign to collect signatures for me, please do so. If you're somebody who is in the tri-state area who refuses to register as a Democrat, sign up anyway. You can help us circulate and help the witnesses, the people who will be collecting the petitions. And the way to do that, we will call you and tell you. You could sign up at votevega.nyc, which is right under my name, votevega.nyc.
And it's also scrolling by at the bottom.
Yeah.
So what is exactly the burden that you face with respect to signatures needed to get on the ballot?
Well, we're taking advantage of the fact that New York State allows you to do something called fusion ballots, meaning I can run in the Democratic primary and as an independent candidate. I can do both. The only caveat is that you have to, of course, collect a number of signatures, right? So to be in the Democratic primary, yes?
Yeah, I was gonna say like make that a caveat. You have to make like one pair of signatures to get on the primary ballot and one pair of signatures to be independent.
She's looking out for you, Jose, making sure you hit all the talking points.
I'm this is why you have people who prep you before this stuff, and that person who preps me is me. So, you can take it out on me basically. But yes, that's right. There's 2 windows for when you can qualify to get on the ballots for your respective position or for your respective petition, right? So from February 24th to April 2nd, you only have 6 weeks to collect 1,250 valid signatures. But the problem is New York City, New York State, people are allowed to scrutinize your petitions. You can't just, sign it yourself or make up signatures 1,250 times. You have to get real valid signatures. And the way they check that is anybody in New York State is allowed to scrutinize your petitions and say, oh, there's a problem here. Let's cross that one off. So we want to go for triple the signatures. We want to basically know we have triple within the first week. We don't want to spend 6 weeks getting me on the ballot. That's a lot of energy. We want to use that energy campaigning. We want to get people on the ground, passing out my literature, going door to door. So we want to limit the time we're petitioning. And then for the independent ballot, if people want to get me on the ballot, you got to petition. You got to sign my petition in the middle of April. So it starts like April 16th, and you have till the end of May, basically. Till the beginning of May. No, the end of May. That's right. You have till the end of May to get 6 weeks, but it's triple the signature requirements. So it goes from 1,250 to 3,500 signatures.
Hold on, let me make sure I understand. You're saying that's the requirement, or that's how many you want to get to as a cushion?
That's the requirement. As an independent.
Well, why is the requirement more for independents than for Democrats?
You don't see. You wonder why.
Well, that doesn't even seem legal. I don't know if I ever told you, but I was the lead plaintiff once years ago in a ballot access lawsuit that the ACLU filed. And in that case, it was about not getting a candidate on the ballot, but to get a new party. And at that time, I don't remember the specific time frame, but it was something like you had to get X amount of signatures way in advance of the election. And that was a problem because people just aren't even paying attention to it until it gets close. And as a result, no new party had gotten on the ballot in like a zillion years in California. So we sued to say, well, that's not reasonable. You got to make it closer to the election when people actually care about it. And guess what?
You got it?
I am your hero. We won that.
Well, it's
Yeah.
great if you were living in California.
Yeah. So it's with some degree of experience that I say to you, you might want to look into contacting the ACLU or somebody to file a lawsuit, just in case you don't get that many.
Maybe not Jose, given his.
Well,
What do you mean?
The ACLU
What do you mean?
will represent anyone.
They're very big on like anti-Semitism is this plague that needs to be.
No,
well, they used to be principled. They probably aren't anymore, but they're not the only organization that might do it. I mean,
no, the ACLU defended Guy Christensen even after he had made those very heinous statements that I do not agree with about the justification for the shooting of the Israeli embassy staff.
Yeah,
the ACLU came out and said, he has a federally protected.
That's good to hear. So sometimes they're principled. Now there may be something I'm overlooking because to me it just screams as illegal.
Well, what I know, maybe Jose can elaborate, is that
Yeah.
on Andrew Cuomo's way out is when the signatures were, I believe, doubled to the point where New York is now considered the hardest state for an independent to be on the ballot. So I don't really know more information on that. I just know that's the extent to my knowledge. It was done in this haste manner on the way out. So it really wasn't kind of this up for debate thing.
Well,
it's very similar to the lawsuit that I was involved in. The details are different, but the basic issue of making it difficult for newcomers to have access is the same, and it's not right.
I mean, it shouldn't be that way. So I mean, it's certainly maybe a fight worth taking up, but I know that we will, in Jose's case.
Look at all the good advice I give you, Jose, and you and you don't even wear a yarmulke as a gesture of respect.
We couldn't find one that would fit, so that's kind of the issue.
Is that it? Okay.
What happened with Andrew Cuomo was on his way out, basically, in order to have ballot access status in New York State, like if you want to be a party, let's say we want to start the Citizens for Jeff Norman party, right?
Excellent party.
There's a couple of ways to get that to happen. You need to run a candidate for governor, you need to run a candidate for governor, and you need to accrue at least 2% of the vote. That's how you become a party, basically, right? On a basic principled level. However, so what some parties do, like the Working Families Party, is, hey, we want to keep our party status. We want to keep our ballot status. So we're just going to endorse a popular candidate that we know is going to get over the threshold of votes to get, right? Well, this year when Andrew Cuomo did not get the petition, the endorsement of the Working Families Party, he said, word, I'm going to make it 3 times as hard now for independents to get on the ballot. So he raised the petition requirements, basically resetting everyone's petition requirements. So the Greens were kicked off, the Libertarians were kicked off, the Working Family Party was able to stay on the ballot because they were able to collect the signatures, I believe, and then they went, and that was another way to sort of corral them back to endorsing the popular candidate that would have gotten a certain number of votes to keep their ballot line. It was definitely really treacherous. And as a result, that law was never changed because it wasn't a law. They snuck that change into like a budget bill, So like in order for this to change now, it's got to go through, there has to be a whole resolution introduced into the state assembly. However, there is hope. RFK Jr. does have a lawsuit that is ongoing to this day. Because he couldn't get on the ballot. Diane Sayre did, by the way, same requirements. All I'm saying, regardless, Robert Kennedy Jr. couldn't do it. Diane Sayre did, but we support Kennedy's lawsuit anyway against the state of New York, because it is unfair, it isn't draconian, and it is.
Did Diane hire a lawyer, or did she represent herself?
No, Diane got the signatures needed without paying a single person. That's what happened.
She didn't have. I'm sorry, I misunderstood you. I thought you said she had to fight it in court.
No. RFK Jr. had to fight it in court because there were a few things he did wrong on his petitions. I'm not going to give the insider tea publicly here. We just know some things he did wrong, and he didn't take or his people didn't take the advice. But regardless, there is a lawsuit to try and get that signature requirement down and make it easier for independents and third parties to get back on the ballot.
All right. Well, let's get into some issues. This past week, this became a big story. There was a police shooting. Somebody called the police. The police showed up, and the guy who lived there had a knife, and the police wound up shooting him. And Mamdani, I always mispronounce his name, Mamdani, reacted by saying, well, this should not be in the justice system. He was obviously mentally ill. This should be handled by mental health professionals. And he visited the person who was shot survived. He's in the hospital, and Mamdani visited him. And so I think the police were offended that he was siding with what Mamdani called the victim. But let's take a look at that shooting. This is just raw footage from the police body cam.
Oops. Ever since I've been watching videos, I don't stand by the door no more, bro. No, just never know. How you doing?
Are you called?
You called?
Yes.
You coming?
Yes.
Oh my gosh. No, you're fine. You're fine. Good.
Baba, no!
Hey! Put the knife down! Put the knife down! Put the knife down! Put the knife down! Put the knife! Move! Put the knife down! Put the knife down! Put the knife down! Put the knife down! Drop the knife! Drop the knife! Drop the knife! Shots fired! Shots fired!
So it's hard to tell from that video. I don't know if I guess there's other information that he has some kind of mental problem. I don't really know, but I don't know how you would tell from that video. But you tell me if you guys disagree. I don't think we're really in a position to judge that. But what about the idea of taking things out sometimes, taking it out of the justice system and having it treated as a mental health problem rather than as a criminal problem?
Morgan, you want to kick this off?
I guess, yeah. Well, I know that we have previously on the show have discussed, I believe, pardon me, I can't remember her name. I just remember the title she gave herself, the terrorist therapist. We discussed the amount of mental health institutions and beds have decreased significantly from decade to decade, especially and even in New York as well. I think that is something it's really imperative to note. These cops, they're not equipped to handle with someone that having a mental episode. I would say that man clearly is. I mean, I'm not a doctor, and this is just my kind of observation. It seems like that's not very that's erratic behavior. It's not like I don't feel comfortable kind of giving him like diagnosing or anything like that, but I would say
let me play it without the volume so we can talk over it. See, you say obviously. I don't know how you know that. I'm not.
Well, I'm saying would a person who is in their sane mind, pick up a kitchen knife and charge somebody that they don't know?
Well, I'm really very much interested in and open to this idea of it being treated as a mental health problem. But I think the obvious question is, where do you draw the line? Because it would seem to me that a high percentage of people that the police deal with aren't exactly mentally stable.
Well, I mean, I want to make something clear. I mean, you can clearly see the cop isn't trying to kill the guy initially, right? He closes the door. He's trying to tell him to back off. He picks the gun up instinctually. What this is a tragedy of the society as a whole. And I think what Morgan is getting at is the right actual way to look at this. The amount of mental institutions that have closed, the number of beds, psychiatric wards that have closed down is the real tragedy here. The fact that person who was shot wasn't getting the help that they needed at an earlier age when they were younger, to be monitored, to have the resources they needed is the real tragedy. As for the police, I mean, Morgan's right. I don't know to what extent the police are trained to deal with mentally deranged or mentally ill people, and I'm sure, I've seen it a lot here in the streets of New York City where you do see violent homeless people who are mentally ill, who do carry around lethal weapons. You know, it's like what, you know. So
well, also veterans. There's a lot of veterans who have PTSD, and many cops are veterans, and they've set up special courts for veterans. So, you know, it's not unheard of to, you know, make allowances for mental health problems in the justice system.
I genuinely hope that this young person is okay and that they make it through their critical injuries. I know that it's still critical. I don't know the specific diagnosis, and like Morgan, I'm not going to try to diagnose him. You know, the reports that I've read is that he is mentally ill. Don't know what. I don't think it necessarily matters. I don't think with any of these incidents you can ever look at them as like one by one. You know, this is clearly a tragedy of circumstances. You know, and you can see the cop was trying to be respectful. Can I come in? He stomps his boots outside not to track snow. You know, he's trying to be courteous. He's trying to figure it out. All of a sudden, he sees a guy charging at him with a knife. I don't know what context the man had going into the building. I don't know if he knew the guy was mentally ill or not, you know, but that's
that's what I was going to say, because it looks like it's where he lives, and it was probably his family who called. So in a situation like that, and I don't know that they did or they didn't, but in a situation like that, obviously the family could say when they call into 911 that the person's mentally ill, and there should be a protocol in the police department to handle it in a particular way when they've been advised before they even arrive. Now, you can't really do that if a stranger is the one who calls the police and doesn't know it, but you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I think that you know, this really is a societal issue and a cultural issue. You know, you're not going to fix it by, quote, reforming the police alone. You're not going to fix it by having like just community policing alone. The issue you brought up about the veterans with PTSD, why do they have PTSD to begin with? You know, how many wars have we started around the world that we're sending? You know, what kind of violent culture have we breeded, not just here at home through our TVs, our video games, and all that other stuff, but the violence that we cause abroad, it does come back home. People do internalize that. People do, you know, intake that, and they will imitate, you know, subconsciously. That is the core of the issue. And unless we can address the violence that we commit, you know, it's interesting, right? Why is it that presidents get a pass that any other ordinary person would be tried in The Hague for? That's the problem. So, you know, in this specific case, would I say the cop overreacted? I won't even make that judgment. I mean, I might have a question, like any good, you know, because, you know, if the guy had died, I would say that the cop deserves a trial. I wouldn't cast an aspersion. The question I have is, why did you reach for the gun? You know, did you not have a taser? You know, was there not a non-lethal way to subdue the person? You know, like and there might be answers for that. I'm not claiming I know these things. I would just want these kinds of questions answered. You know, I think that in the same way that Trump called the people who killed Alex Preddy heroes, you know, you can't also then denounce them as murderers. Not because I'm not inclined to agree with people who say that, but because constitutionally they have a right to a trial before you can call them murderers, before you can say they're guilty of something. Everyone has that right, you know, and it's the same situation here with the cop. I'm not going to say the cop overreacted or was guilty. There needs to be an investigation, and there needs to be a judge, and he needs to be tried before we try to condemn this guy. So that's...
Yeah, I'm not even sure he should be tried. I don't know. I would start by getting informed as to what normally happens in situations like this. How are they trained? It's not, I mean, if he did something that conflicts with his training, then maybe put him on trial. But I don't say just because he fired his gun, put him on trial.
I just think that person who, you know, clearly he's with his parents, he has some supervision. You know, what were the resources that were missing in his younger life that he didn't have access to or couldn't have access to that would have prevented?
I completely agree. Yeah, get at the root of the problem so you never even have to involve the police, hopefully.
Yeah, exactly. You know, so I think that's the issue.
Okay, well, another news story that made me think of you was when Don Lemon and a bunch of protesters invaded a church in Minnesota because they found out, and I guess I haven't heard this denied, so I guess it's more or less confirmed, that one of the pastors there was also an ICE agent. And I mentioned you actually. I think it was on Probable Cause. We have another podcast on Tuesdays that's about crime and punishment issues, or maybe it was on last week's Whiners. I talked about you because you do these interventions that are quite provocative. You're, on property that you don't control. You're not necessarily welcome to be there. But I've never heard you claim that you have a right to do it. You do it as an act of civil disobedience. Hopefully you won't suffer any punishment. But if you do, I don't think your defense is, hey, I actually had a right to do that. Maybe I had a moral right. But these protesters and Don Lemon seem to think, they said it flat out, that they have a First Amendment right to protest in the middle of a church service. And that's the contrast I saw. And so they're now facing federal charges. The stuff you do is normally, the only thing you might face would be a local offense like disturbing the peace or trespassing. But in this case, there are federal civil rights charges. And also there's a federal statute that prohibits intimidating people at a church, which is the same statute that prohibits demonstrators from blocking the entrance to abortion clinics. So Don Lemon and these protesters are facing some serious time.
Well,
I guess the lesson there, Jose, is if Richie Torres is speaking at a church, be careful.
Oh, I would interrupt it. I mean, well, for example, there was the Bronx borough president had her second inauguration, here, and she invited Richie Torres and Chuck Schumer to speak at the ceremony. I mean, I've actually interrupted award ceremonies, like they did one for Adriano Espaillat. And this was in the beginning of 2023. And I stood up and I said, oh, we're here to give you an award. Well, look at Harlem. Harlem looks like crap. There's, people overdosing on the streets, and we're giving you a Lifetime Achievement Award. You haven't done anything for this community. But I think that the thing is, when you decide to do that, when you decide to intervene, you are acting on a principle of moral law. This is something that Dr. King spoke about often, which is that, of course, you have laws, you have the laws of man, but you also have divine law, you have moral law, you have something that is above that. And I agree with him when he says you are allowed to violate the law of man if it violates, moral law. For example, if you like Rosa Parks, I have to move to the back of the bus just to allow somebody with lighter skin, that is obviously not consistent or coincides with that which is moral. Now, my understanding is that the pastor that Don Lemon interrupted was an ICE agent.
No. He is a different pastor at the same church, not the one that was conducting
the one
the
was, I believe maybe he left prior, but the one that Don Lemon had the video with was not the ICE agent.
Here, I'll show you this is after the the disturbance was still going on, but after the disturbance began, Don Lemon went over and talked to the pastor who was conducting the service.
Think of this. I mean, this is unacceptable. It's shameful. It's shameful to interrupt a public gathering of Christians in worship. But there were folks who will say, I have to take care of my flock. Okay, but listen, we live in there's a constitution in the First Amendment to freedom of speech and freedom to assemble and protest. We're here to worship. We're here to worship Jesus because that's the hope of these cities. That's the hope of the world is Jesus Christ. I want to be very respectful. Please don't push me though. We're here to worship Jesus. Yes. That's why we're here. Yeah. Okay, that's why we're here. Okay. That's what we're about. Don't you think Jesus would be understanding we're about and love these folks? We're about spreading the love of Jesus. But did you try to talk to them as a Christian? No one is willing to talk. Okay, I have to take care of my church and my family, so I asked that you actually would also leave this building. You don't want us to unless you're here to worship. I'm always worship. I'm a Christian. We're here to worship. Yeah. We're here to worship. Okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
All right, so did you hear him say I want you to leave? And then he did not leave for 7 minutes, but that would be a local trespassing charge, if anything, but the locals aren't going to charge him. So he's not in trouble federally. But you also heard him give two different messages, talking about Jesus. That may be the sort of moral argument you were talking about. But before that, since Don Lemon is an idiot, he said they have a First Amendment right to protest in the middle of a church service, which of
Yeah,
course
I think
is flat wrong.
so. If I understand correctly, there is a pastor who is an ICE agent at that church, but that wasn't the pastor he was interrupting.
You got it now.
Yeah, I just want to make that clarification so people don't think negatively on that face. Since
That's interesting, right? Because like, if that had actually been articulated, where Don Lemon said, "I'm trying to bring awareness to the fact that one of the pastors at this church is in fact an ICE agent, and I think that everybody here who says they worship Christ, should know that and should treat, go accordingly." Again, you might have, I think Don Lemon would have had a better argument, and I probably would have even supported it. But what I saw there was just sort of arrogance and snide. It's like, well, I have a First Amendment
Well,
right.
not only that,
or like with the "don't touch me" part. Yeah, no, I agree, and I think
that's just funny.
I've witnessed how you and Kynan and Robert, when he did it, other people, the process of doing these interventions. It's not something where you're going up there and you're just because you want the likes and views. You're doing something to interject to the audience and broadly, to the videos that go to a broader audience, to shake something morally in their core that something's not right. Why are we uplifting this individual, listening to this individual, for instance, with like a Nancy Pelosi, why is this woman who has, cheered on every war have the soapbox to tell you how to think and what to think and what's moral and what's not moral? I think that is kind of the true art of what you do in interventions. It kind of sets aside of what this action was, of where they're going in there, they're just doing chants, and they're shutting down essentially a thing of worship, which kind of spoils a great action that could have been taken to morally shake the cores of these people who subscribe to Christianity. Well, why are you doing this? Ask a question to the pastor, and provoke an answer back, as opposed to them kind of just shutting down the entire service. You make this question where you're, people will go home and think about it that are in the service. Well, why are we, you give these teachings of Jesus Christ and they tell us to, take in the poor and the needy. And then this is how we're treating our neighbors. How do I, act kind of dumb about it? Like, how am I supposed to continue to come here every Sunday if this is how I'm being led to believe, or I'm being told to shut up about it, or why are we not talking about it?
Exactly.
That's kind of
the other thing is, if you do think there's a moral imperative to break the law, it's important to know what the potential punishment is and then make your decision. Don't do it without knowing, because what you didn't see in that video is that Don Lemon at other points was talking about how the intent was to intimidate these people. And that's exactly what the federal statute prohibits.
Yeah.
So he personally didn't do the intimidation, but the protesters did. So that's evidence against them. And also he could face conviction for conspiring with them.
I would just, as somebody who has, I didn't interrupt the service. I was in a synagogue where Rachel Maddow was speaking, right? And this was October 16th or October 17th, right? 10 days after October 7th. And I was in a synagogue, in the largest synagogue in New York City. And one of the reasons that I stood up there was because, of course, it's Rachel Maddow. She's a Catholic, horrible. But I went there and I said, you're going to get this wrong, just like you got everything else wrong. There's an ethnic cleansing in Gaza, and you and the rest of the media are going to lie about that, right? So, to say that in the location, which is Temple Emmanuel, 10 days after October 7th. See, Dr. King wrote in a letter from a Birmingham jail, we do these things to raise the Socratic tension, to where you highlight the problem, to where it becomes so ugly that it cannot be ignored. That's why we do these things. That's why we intervene. You have to continue to raise awareness of it, but you have to do it in such a way that is principled. Like, if I had just gone to Temple Emmanuel and I turned around and I bared my ass, that's obviously no one's going to take me seriously, right? And that's just shock and awe. That's not actually the point of doing it. You have to do it in such a way that is also poetic and beautiful. You have to try to convey that as much as possible. Because you're right. You know you're going to go and be an asshole and disturb the peace. But you have to know why you're doing that. You have to say, yeah, because I want the people at this church, like Morgan was saying, to confront the fact that we're preaching, love thy neighbor, and yet here we are putting them in handcuffs and sending them back, So, yeah.
Just to clarify, that federal statute actually does not prohibit you yelling out at a church service or anything like that. It prohibits you intimidating people there and blocking the entrance or the exit. But as far as just yelling out and disrupting it, you would only be facing the same local laws that would always apply no matter what it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean,
so if Richie Torres is speaking at a church, you can yell at him and only face.
Yeah, my largest critique was, this action. It seemed, no other words. I mean, it just kind of seemed like it really was meant to kind of turn people off from a sentiment that people were kind of clinging on to or coming on to terms with, of kind of like how bad ICE is being in some of these communities. I think that's kind of it further divides people, is what I'm trying to say. It didn't seem like it was well thought out, and it was kind of done by people who want to get the likes and clicks, as opposed to kind of thinking things in the long term of how the kind of impact they could make. That's my critique on the whole event. That I wish that it would have been done with a little more thought and kind of shutting it down, in the sense, because I remember there was one video clip that I think Don Lemon had an interview with an individual that was with his son, and the guy was like subscribing. I love you. I'm kind of overwhelmed by this whole action. I gotta go. Where that's someone that you probably could have reached down the aisle and had a legitimate conversation with and told them your grievances on what's happening in your community, and why did they feel okay with it, or why wouldn't they feel okay with it, and if they could help you in your efforts to try and speak out against this and let your representatives know that you're against this action. So that's what my critique on the whole thing was, is that it didn't seem like it really was meant to do anything other than make themselves feel good in their action, as opposed to actually try and move the needle or
yeah, exactly. It's just this liberal hippy dippy feel good stuff, as opposed to something that what you're doing is probably wrong in one sense, but you're doing it because something needs to be said. It needs to be highlighted. There's something so ugly and hypocritical here going on that I have no choice but to stand up and say something. That's not what this was. This was just, let's make some headlines for a second, I mean, Morgan, you've been there when we prep and we're like going over, like, what has this person said before? What are we going to get them on? And we also don't fight the cops either, or the security.
That's a part of it. It's part of the kind of the awe and what kind of shakes people morally is when they witness someone who is saying something that's the truth, or that's right, that you can't really object to the facts of what you're saying, and they're being snatched and grabbed and yanked and pushed out of there and booed. And I think that's kind of what wakes people up more when they watch those videos.
That's one of Jose's unique skills, is the ability to keep speaking articulately while they're beating the shit out of him. Well, I don't think there are many other people anywhere in the world who have that ability. Not many.
Yeah, I don't know. I credit it from my many years of doing improv in school. So,
I bet that's actually the truth. Yeah.
The yes and principle,
Yes, I'm familiar with it.
Mm-hmm.
I like improv when it's like preparation much more than I like it when it's the show. I just think like the percentage of times it really clicks at a show is not high enough. But to prepare you for protests or to prepare you for show business, it's an excellent skill to develop.
Well, I know, Jose, you're only you only have like an hour with us. We kind of went over that.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So I want to make a plea and give you kind of the final say of, pushing people to come out and help you petition, donate, help you in any way you can.
Yeah. Well, thanks for well, like I said, February 24th is the first day on which we will be petitioning to get my name on the Democratic ballot. We prefer, if you are a New York State Democrat voter. If you are not a New York State Democrat voter, you can still help us. You can help the people who are in circulating, and we will walk you through how to help. Just like, for example, Morgan's going to be on the ground helping us, and she's
I'll be
not
there.
from New York. You know, she's a staunch Republican. She's a staunch Republican, you know, from North Carolina, gun-toting MAGA all the way, and she's going to come out and help us anyway. So, you know, you can too. So if you want to come out.
Big tent. It's a big, beautiful tent.
If you want to come out and help us get this done, you can go to votevega.nyc. We're going to have over 100 people petition for us.
I'll help you too, but if you can wait till the spring. I hate the cold weather.
Okay, you'll come out.
Come back out for the independent ballot.
In the spring.
Come on.
Yeah.
Oregon
That's what I was. That's actually what I was thinking. That's what I was thinking in that video of the cops showing up. And go, oh man, look how cold it is! All that snow. I'd already be scared.
Yeah, but you know, anyway, but look, if you're somebody who, for whatever reason, you don't want to come to New York because you think, you know, it's like basically Mamdani-stan now, and you know, it's like Iraq, you know, or something, you know, because you've been brainwashed by, you know, the conservative media to think it's places like
my buddies.
You know, but if you still want to support and help us, we are trying to raise $100,000 in the next 2 weeks. We are 12% of the way there. That is 1,000 people giving $100, or that's 100 people giving $1,000. Be a part of that. You know, whether it's the 1,000 people or the 100 people, that is their quickest path. That way we can buy merchandise. In fact, I'm trying to get little tote bags with our Vote Vega on it. So, you know, if only I had some leads.
You should sell yarmulkes. All right, bye, Jose.
Jose, it's always a pleasure. I am so proud of you, my friend, and everything you do, and you are just someone that's worth following. So.
Oh, thank you kindly. Thank you kindly. Both
Same here. You're welcome anytime on the Whiners.
All right, I want to come back every Thursday, and
all right. I'll tell you what. If you drink Manischewitz wine, you're welcome.
All right, thank you guys.
Take care, Jose. Shalom. All right, let's is this what we want, or do we want
that's fine.
Or do we want this?
I like that better, actually.
All right. Your wish is my command, darling. So we have covered pretty extensively the two shootings in Minneapolis on both of our podcasts, this one and also Probable Cause. At this point, I would like to, before we say goodnight, just talk to you a little bit about how things are developing and how they could be developing. In particular, Trump pulled Kristi Noem off of the situation, and what was that other guy's name? Bovino?
Was it Greg Bovino?
Yeah,
right?
That's his name. And put Tom Homan in charge, who has a reputation and the respect of people who don't even necessarily agree politically with the Trump administration, but the guy is a law enforcement veteran.
Yeah, he's from the Obama administration, which I think.
Yeah. He's worked for various, both political parties. I shouldn't say various because there are only two. And you know, Trump, I think, deserves blame for putting Noem and Stephen Miller in charge because, you know, Trump is like a just get it done kind of guy, and Miller and Noem were taking their cues from him, which is a recipe for trouble because they don't really know how to allocate resources, and they're not law enforcement experts.
Yeah.
And I think Trump should be blamed for that. And now Homan is on the scene, and he knows how to. I'm sure the locals there, just like police departments everywhere, respect him and know that. And so he's making progress. And here's a little announcement that he made yesterday.
Given this increase in unprecedented collaboration, and as a result of the need for less law enforcement officers to do this work in a safer environment, I have announced effective immediately, we will draw down 700 people effective today. 700 law enforcement personnel. We have also fully integrated CBP personnel into the ICRO team structure under one unified chain of command. Not two chains of command, there'd be one chain of command here. Any large enforcement operation I've ever been involved with, There's one chain of command, and that's where we're moving forward. During my press conference last week, I announced that moving forward, ICE will be conducting targeted immigration enforcement operations, like ICE has traditionally done for decades, based on reasonable suspicion to question and detain. ICE will conduct these operations and transnational criminal organization investigations with a focus on national security and public safety. I want to be clear. Just because you prioritize public safety threats don't mean we forget about everybody else. We will continue to enforce the immigration laws in this country.
So what do you say, Morgan? Do you feel better?
No,
I don't mean it personally about you, but I mean, do you feel like the situation has improved?
No, I think the damage has already been done. You have 80% of the people that ICE has picked up, over this last year, have no criminal record. That's not what they told us they were doing. And the whole fact that where this anger and sentiment is coming from, I guess you would say, subscribe to the MAGA movement, Trump's issuing more visas than ever for these unskilled and skilled laborers. So it's not like that's the whole reason that he was really fomenting this fear was, oh, they're stealing your jobs. Well, he's legally giving them to immigrants, skilled and unskilled. So I think that's kind of the thing that no one really touches on. It's like, that's kind of an easy fix right there, is kind of asserting or forcing these corporations, like when we had Ellen and Kevin on, Ellen Jemerson and Kevin, pardon me, I forgot his last name. If you could fill that in for me, Jeff. Your friend Kevin that works with the skilled visas. Anyways, I
can't believe
is that he's a good friend of ours.
I hope he's not watching. Hang on a second.
No, I'm so sorry.
Kevin Lynn. I've known him for so many years too. I can't believe it.
Is that you can hold these corporations accountable. These corporations, they basically say, oh, we can't find anyone that wants to do the job, but they're not really looking, is what, Ellen has said. In the unskilled labor force, in the skilled labor force, it's different. Kevin Lynn can, attest that, where there are people who want the jobs. There are people who have gone to school for these jobs. So I think that's
also, since you're talking about employers, why not penalize the employers for hiring illegals instead of going after the illegals? What do you think about that?
In the sense of like the large corporations that are doing this on a mass scale, yes. Also corporations are, using prison labor to, make more gains. All of these things need to be addressed. But my whole thing is I found that ICE, with the Greg Bovino, with the Kristi Noem, was meant to just further divide the country, it seems.
Yeah, but that ended. So I don't understand why you said no when I said, don't you see that the situation has improved? When you said the damage has been done.
Damage has been done.
I didn't ask you about, but how does that say anything about whether or not it's improving now? You refuse to acknowledge that it's improving because something bad or a lot happened.
No, so what I'm saying is what ICE has done in this past year, where they have worked with Palantir, a corporation's called Paragon, and an Israeli company that hacks phones. They're doing that to hack American citizens. Even ICE has come out and said that they are creating databases of American citizens who are objecting to this, their enforcement. That's what I mean. The damage has been done. They've been given the reign to make basically a database on American citizens. And
all right, I guess you just won't admit that it's getting better now, or you won't say, or because the answers you're giving don't relate to what's going on now.
Well, I said the damage is already, I don't get where, do you not understand me when I'm saying the damage has already been done, that they've already created, you've already had a public sentiment that has allowed for more surveillance, more authoritarian rule that your government's not giving you back. So
I do understand. I do understand. Do you understand that that doesn't answer the question as to what's going on now?
With Tom Holland?
There's nothing that will this doesn't please you. Is there anything that will please you? Or is the answer always going to be no because of what has already happened in the past?
Well, Jeff, what would please me is if we overrode the Patriot Act, which is a relic from the War on Terror that has done nothing but cause just murder all across the world. And are we, confused of when it's going to come back home? Like I said previously,
well, when Jose gets elected to Congress, he can be a person who works on revoking the Patriot Act. But I'm trying to focus right now on short-term solutions. I like what's happening there because they've taken out a third of the agents that are on the street. There's some cooperation with the state in terms of turning over prisoners to the feds, which is one of the main reasons that there are so many ICE agents there doing stuff that is not in their skill set. So I'm sorry that doesn't please you, but
I don't think that we can forgive our government for what has been done this past year, where they have labeled American citizens domestic terrorists, where you've allowed a federal agent.
Hey, I just blamed Trump for putting the wrong people in charge. I also said, hey, let's go after the employers. So it's not like I'm being, too anti-immigrant. But so you don't need to convince me. You're the one, I think, that needs to be convinced that, hey, maybe there are some other aspects that can be fine-tuned in the short term. Now, when I also want to apologize on one hand, but also stand by what I said in another. Last week, I kind of lumped you in with people who were saying only abolish ICE, because that's not going to happen, and I'm trying to be realistic about it. You didn't say only that. You said let's shift responsibility more towards the Border Patrol. But that's the part I want to stand by. And actually, I didn't so much disagree with you as say, well, what reason do you have to believe that would be better, especially since it was that agency that shot Alex Preddy? So I think I ask the right questions, even if we don't know the answers immediately.
And I would say that I kind of stand on this broadening of a federal agency like ICE to kind of push the envelope on what we are willing to let go on our constitutional rights. And I think that it also is exploited within Border Patrol. For years, Border Patrol within the border and 100 miles extended beyond the border, they're allowed to detain and confiscate materials for no probable cause, just a simple feeling. They don't have to articulate a probable cause to confiscate your belongings, detain you. That is an issue. I think that is something that we need to object to. That's my constitutional right, my Fourth Amendment right. And I don't want a non-citizen who, in their sovereign land in Mexico or in Canada, to have their rights, their inalienable rights, infringed upon because of the product of the war on terror. So that's I have critiques for the Border Patrol as well. I think that we are allowing our rights to be chipped away at for security, or the premise or the promise of security, excuse me. When it hasn't bared any fruit, the war on terror, all it's done is just allow, to this extent, American citizens to be labeled as terrorists.
Right.
Which, like I said previously in the past show, that's a heavy word. You no longer have habeas corpus. The government can detain you indefinitely for no rhyme or reason. They can, take your belongings. It's an issue. And I think that we shouldn't.
No, I agree. And I think that we are a microcosm of society. And I hope that we're setting a good example here, because one of the things that prevents getting at a solution is that the two sides are too much at each other, and they're too invested in their own positions, instead of being willing to give a little bit, not necessarily just for the sake of compromise, but maybe because there's a sincere recognition that the other side does deserve some weight to be given to their argument. And, so that's what I'm getting. I just want to play an audio clip. As I said, it was just a question that I asked when I said, well, who's to say Border Patrol would really be better? Andy McCarthy, the former federal prosecutor, does a podcast called The McCarthy Report, and actually he addressed that issue. And just take a listen to what he said.
I think that one of the biggest problems here is I don't know why we have the border. I know why. It's because of a federal resources problem. But the Border Patrol's training, I can't help but think, Rich, that if you had like the Minneapolis Police Department, if they would enforce the law, or better, if you had NYPD out there who are trained in crowd control, in demonstration situations where you're dealing with American citizens who can flit from criminal activity to peaceful protest on a dime, a lot of the stuff that's happening wouldn't happen. You're taking agents whose training is in the badlands of the border, where they much more often have to use violence against people who are, some of them, even if they're not dangerous aliens themselves, they're being brought into the country by dangerous human trafficking organizations. That's what the Border Patrol is trained for. That's what they deal with. To take that skill set, which is very important for national security, and stick it in the middle of Minneapolis is not a promising venture.
All right. So aside from the fact that you think the Border Patrol are violating people's rights, do you think the rest of what Andy McCarthy said makes sense?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, you have both of these agencies predominantly are trained in counterterrorism tactics, as opposed to what local law enforcement, people within your community, their kids go to school with your kids, they have a different mindset on how to deal with the members in the community versus people that you plop from out of the community into the community and say, deal with it. And so I think that, it was a recipe of a disaster. And I stand by the fact that, that's partly why these individuals were killed, is that you have that sentiment. And not only that sentiment is that this almost like, for lack of better terms, propaganda of otherism. That these radical leftists they're crazy and they're amounting to the word of terrorism, as opposed to maybe they have legitimate grievances. And granted, yeah, I think some of these demonstrations and these protests are just moral grandstanding, and it's not really meant to help the situation. On some cases, they actually make the situation 10 times worse. But they're not your enemy. And I think that's what I fear when I see some of these ICE agents interacting with these individuals, and these individuals acting, with these ICE agents. They're essentially neighbors. If they took their clothes off, or they're not like they're naked, but their gear.
Even you ever heard that Bob Dylan song? Even the president of the United States must sometimes have to stand naked. He wrote that when the president wasn't Donald Trump. I think it was when maybe JFK was president.
You could share a beer with the individual. Yeah, it's I think
right. Well, that's why it's important for the local police to be involved, because they literally are the community. Not only the same people when their clothes are off, but they literally are part of the community, and they know that they don't necessarily know everybody, but they know some of the people, and they certainly know the terrain, the streets, the heart of the city. Yeah. So it's very important to get the local police involved.
No, yeah, I agree with that, and I think that's a good way to end things, I guess, in that conversation is that we both agree on that.
All right, and I don't know, I'm interested in this on one hand. On the other hand, we covered it so much, maybe we should move on to other things. But whether we cover it on the podcast or not, I'm certainly going to be watching closely how that situation develops in Minnesota.
Mm-hmm.
All right, darling. Thank you so much. And thanks to our beloved audience. That'll do it for tonight. We'll be back next week, 7 p.m. Take it easy.
Always a pleasure. Good night.
Thank you, darling. Same here. Bye-bye.